Why the Kiowas called the buffalo God's gift, and how they protected the buffalo. The buffalo were incredibly important to the Kiowa people. They considered it God's gift to them, and whenever they killed a buffalo, they never wasted a single part. Naturally, they ate the meat. They either roasted it on the fire, or they boiled it to make a soup. Or they'd cut it into thin strips, lay it on the grass, allow it to dry, where it became jerky. Then they'd either eat the jerky as it was, or they'd boil it to make soup. They'd also make sausage out of the buffalo meat. They'd pound it with suet, which is the hard fat that surrounds the loins and kidneys of the buffalo. Then they'd add wild plums for extra flavor. The meat was an important part of the buffalo, but a close second was the hides. Women would stretch the hides out on the grass. Then they'd use either a sharpened rib or an elk horn. They'd scrape away hair, fat, and dried bits of meat. It was back-breaking work, but women took pride in a job well done. Once they removed all the fat, hair, and bits of meat from the hide, then they'd use a mixture of buffalo brains and liver to tan the hides. They used to tan hides to make their teepees. Women would take the sinew from the buffalo near the spine and close to the loins. They'd use that to sew the hides together. It took between 10 and 30 hides to make a teepee. They also used the hides to make sweat lodges. Sometimes they'd keep the fur on the hides and tan them in order to help them to stay warm in the winter. The woolly hides could be used as a blanket or as a coat. They'd also use the wool to add padding to pillows and to cribs, and they'd use the wool to stuff the pillows as well. Buffalo hides could be used to make saddles, bridles, and other important gear for riding horses. The hides were also used to make leggings and moccasins. Kiowas also used the hides to cover their shields. From the hides, they would make pouches to carry food, clothing, and other important equipment. Buffalo's hooves were used to make rattles that were important in spiritual ceremonies. Medicine men also used the buffalo's tail as a ceremonial switch. The Kiowas would also use the buffalo sinew to tie spear points to their shafts. Kiowa women would make gum by boiling a buffalo's forehead, lips, and gums. Kiowa men rarely used feather headdresses to go into battle. Instead, they would make helmets out of buffalo hides and attach buffalo horns to the sides, sort of like what the Vikings used to wear. They also used buffalo horns to make dippers and spoons. Of course, they ate all the internal organs as well. After killing a buffalo, Kiowa men would eat the liver raw. They would eat this while the buffalo was being carved up. The buffalo's udders and nose were considered a delicacy by the Kiowa. And last but not least was the buffalo dung. This wasn't wasted either. The Kiowa would either burn it as fuel or they'd pile it up to make altars. That's how important the buffalo were to the Kiowa, and they were keen to protect them. Whenever all the Kiowas lived together in a big village, they would use a process called buffalo holding to ensure that everyone got a fair share of buffalo meat. Essentially, buffalo holding was a form of controlled hunting. The tribe's military was responsible for holding the buffalo, as well as protecting the tribe and holding tribal ceremonies. Holding the buffalo was important because if one or two people hunted the buffalo, they would run away and then others wouldn't get a chance to hunt them. What they would do instead was organize a hunt so that all the men of the tribe would get to hunt at the same time. The men would all line up on their horses holding a bow and arrow. The tribe's military unit would make sure they stayed in line and that no one cheated by going first. They all hunted with bows and arrows because guns were forbidden. The sound of a gun would frighten the buffalo and cause them to run away. At the chief's signal, all of them would rush at the buffalo and shoot at them with their bows and arrows. That way, everyone would get enough meat to last them for almost 2 weeks, and then they'd start again. Sometimes, someone would break the rules. Once, a large Kiowa village was living by the Wichita Mountains near what is now Lawton, Oklahoma. The Kiowa are nomads, and from time to time, the people would move their village to another place. This was one of those times. As the villagers prepared to leave, a group of soldiers called the Men of the Rattle Band were guarding the buffalo. The group was led by a man named Satanta. As Satanta and his men were guarding the buffalo and making sure nobody hunted them without permission, 3 men rode up, and their intent was to go after the buffalo. So Satanta and his men rode up to these 3, and Satanta shouted, "Hold up! We're holding the buffalo." The men didn't answer him, and Satanta said, "What's the matter? Are you angry?" Then he ordered them to go back to their village, but the men refused. One of the men said he was the brother-in-law of another Kiowa named Kicking Bird. He said his sister, Kicking Bird's wife, was sick, and he was angry about it and was going to take it out on the buffalo. Satanta said to him, "You poor, weak little man," sort of the equivalent of today saying, "Boo-hoo, you poor baby." Then Satanta told the men once more to go back to the village. Kiowas back in that day carried quirts. They were whips made out of, you guessed it, buffalo tails. This man struck Satanta's horse with the quirt, and then he rode toward the buffalo. Another man followed him. They weren't interested in hunting the buffalo at all. They just wanted to scare them. They ran toward the buffalo, and then they raised their guns and fired them, spooking the buffalo. Now, buffalo will only run about 3 miles before they get really tired, and then they'll stop and graze. Still, Satanta was furious. He and his man charged after those 2 men, and then they shot their horses out from underneath them. They whipped the men with their quirts and stripped them of their clothes. Then they took their bridles and their saddles and cut them into bits. They forced those 2 men to walk back to the village. It was hot that day, and the men had no water. One of the men said, "It's not our fault. Kicking Bird told us to do this." Satanta said he and his men would talk to Kicking Bird, but when they rode into the village, Kicking Bird was nowhere to be found. Satanta looked for Kicking Bird, but he was told that Kicking Bird was still with his wife, who was still sick. Eventually, another man came into the camp and told Satanta that Kicking Bird was furious over the way Satanta and his men treated Kicking Bird's brother-in-law. Kicking Bird said he was going to whip Satanta, and Satanta said, "Let him try." Then Satanta waited in the village for Kicking Bird to show up, but Kicking Bird never did. Eventually, Satanta got tired of waiting, and he decided to go find Kicking Bird. He told his men they should make peace with Kicking Bird, and he told each man to bring something of value. So they set off with a white mule, 4 horses, saddles, bridles, blankets, and a gun. Eventually, they found Kicking Bird sitting under a tree. And Kicking Bird said to them, "Have you come to make war?" And Satanta said, "No, I've come to make peace." So Satanta and his men gave Kicking Bird the gifts, and they did make peace that day. Eventually, Kicking Bird admitted that he sent those men to disturb the buffalo. He wanted to punish the villagers for moving the village without his permission. This story demonstrates 2 things. The Kiowas were very protective of their buffalo, and wires could get crossed under the best of circumstances. Thank you, my amazing friend, for watching Okie Lore. I'm Sue Merriam. Click the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and ding the notification bell so you never miss another episode. And I'll see you in the next one.